Hello everyone and welcome back. So in my previous video, we already implement the CRUD operation with Zustand state management and we already create the ToDo application, right? And I also show you how to store the data on the local storage. But today we are going to store that data on the real database. So let's first clone this code in here, right? I'm gonna copy this code and then open my iTerm, go to my desktop. And then from here, I'm going to clone that code, right? So let's do git clone and then paste the link. All right, so now you can cd to that folder and then open that into Visual Studio Code. So the first thing what we have to do is we need to run npm install to install all the dependency on this project, right? So let's take a look on the lib and then to do store.ts. This is basically the store of the Zustand, as you can see, right? We already just create everything in here on the previous video. So, okay, it's done. Cool. So now we can do npm run dev, open the localhost 3000. Let's see how the project look like. And here we go, right? This is the project. And now let's try to implement database in this project, and we're going to use Prisma, by the way. Okay, so now let's go to my blog on Medium right here. So anyway, this is basically step by step that you can install Prisma on Next.js application. Let's first install the Prisma. Just copy this command right here, npm install Prisma as a dev dependency. Paste that, right? And then the next thing is we have to initialize the Prisma. So I'm going to copy this command and then go back in here, paste that, right? This is basically will generate the Prisma folder and also the env, I believe. All right, done. As you can see, we have this Prisma folder. Inside that we have the schema.prisma and also we have this env variable. So let's take a look what the next thing what we have to do is basically we need to change the database URL link, right? So I'm going to copy everything in here. This is basically my PostgreSQL on my local. So just make sure you install that on your local, right? And I'm going to paste that. For my user in here is going to be Postgres, and also the password is random password, and the database I'm going to use to do let's say app.db like that, and just make sure my database is running. This one right here, right? I'm use PostgreSQL 15. Let's see. I'm going to click start. Here we go. It's running right now. Cool. Then the next thing is let's try to create the schema, right? Because this to-do application is just really simple. I'm going to create the schema based on the type right here that we have, right? This right here. So let's try to go to the schema.prisma. And then here I'm going to create a model. And then I'm going to give a name to do. And then let's try to put an ID. So the ID is basically should be string. And then I'm going to put this should be as an ID. And then I'm going to put the default value in here. So the default value is come from the UUID. So basically UUID will generate a random number as an ID, right? And the next thing is the text. The text is going to be string. And also next thing is the completed. Completed is Boolean. Great. And I'm going to put the default value is going to be in false, right? And the next thing is the created add. The created add is date time. By default is going to be now. And also we have the update add. I'm just adding this new field. As you can see on the type in here, we don't have the update add, but I just want to adding that type. So here I'm going to say date time. By default, I'm going to say update add. So every time we update the to do, this update add will also update the value. So let's take a look what the next thing we have to do. Let's go to block right here, and we need to running the npx prisma generate. So let's do that down here, npx prisma generate. And after that, we need to push that schema. Basically, we can run npx prisma db push, right? So let's do npx prisma db push, right? This basically will push that schema on the database. Okay, cool, it's done. So now we can check the database on the studio. So we can use npx prisma studio. Let's go back in here, npx Prisma studio. Right, this basically will open the localhost 5555, and as you can see, we have one model called ToDo in here that have ID, tags, completed, and create add, and update add as well. So the next thing is let's try to create the lib folder, right? So I think we have already a lib folder on the project. So I think just create the db.ts file. So we're going to use this touch. So I'm going to use that touch libdb.ts, and this basically will create this db.ts file, and then just copy this right here. This basically will initialize the Prisma client and export that Prisma, so we can use that Prisma whatever we want. So let's paste that. As you can see, this Prisma client, I'm gonna paste that from the generated Prisma, because as you can see here on the schema Prisma, we have these output, right? The output is on my lib generated Prisma. So now we have this generated Prisma, and then we just get that Prisma client from that generated Prisma anyway. Okay, cool, it's done. Let's take a look at the next step. And anyway, we done, right? So the next step, what we have to do is I'm going to create a road, right? So here, the first thing is I'm gonna run npm run dev, and then let's go to app in here and just create API road. So I'm gonna do API slash, I'm gonna call that to-dos, and inside that I'm gonna create road.ts file, just like this. And then in here, I'm gonna make sure the first one I'm gonna create is the get. So what we have to do in here is simple. We can just export the async function. I'm gonna call this get for get request. And then the params is just empty for now, it's fine. And then inside that, I'm gonna create the try and then catch, right? So on the try, what we have to do is I'm gonna grab all the to-dos that are available on the database using Prisma. So I'm gonna say const to-dos set equals to await for the Prisma, right? Prisma come from the lib/db, and then I grab the to-do and then just grab all to-do. So I'm gonna use function called find many, just like this, and then I just want to order by, let's say, created at descending, just like that. So now we need to just return the to do as a response. So we can do return next response come from the next server, and then here I'm going to return as a JSON, and then let's try to put the success to true, and then the data that I'm gonna send is to do's, basically, just like this, right? So now basically we can try the API using extension on my VS Code in here, call that Thunder client. Just create new request, and you can go to whatever link you have in here. So for now, it's gonna be go to http://localhost 3000/API/todo. So let's try to make a get request. Just make sure you on the get request. Just click send, and then hopefully we get a response. As you can see, we have status 200. That means everything is fine. We have this success true, and then the data is empty array. So now let's working with the error things right here. If I do get request and I get an error, I want to return error in here as well. So let's grab the error from catch. And then what we have to do in here is simple. So anyway, I just want to paste that code in here. As you can see, the first thing is I just console log the error fetching to do's, and also return this next response.json success to false, and then the error is this one right here, and the status is a 500. Just that's it for the get request. So now let's working with the post request. So I just want to copy this function in here, right? And then just paste that down here. I'm going to make a comment called post like this. And then inside here, I'm going to paste this function post, just do like this, right? And again, inside that, I'm going to use try and then catch. We catch the error like this. So on the post, basically, we need to grab the data, right? So that's why in here, we need to use the request on the post parameter. So we can do request, and the type of this request is next request. come from the next/server. And then what we have to do, let's try to grab the body value. So here I'm going to say const body set equals to await for the request dot body like this, or request.json, I believe. Yep. And then finally we get the data in here, like whatever you send, right? Like a text or whatever. So in this case, we are going to get the text. So here I'm going to say const with destructuring the text set equals to body like this. So for now, I just want to return the text so you can see the result, right? So let's try to just copy this return on the top and then just paste that down here. Here we go. So I'm gonna say success true and then text set equals to text like this, just for example. So let's go back to the Thunder client and let's see here. I'm gonna change that to the post request. And then let's go to the body, and then we have to send this text right here, right? The example is text into hello world. Just make sure you're putting that on the object. Great. So now let's send that. And as you can see here, we have that data, right? Success true and then text hello world. If I change the text to just hello, of course, we just get hello right here because on the road, we just send text as a text. So first, I think we need to check if user send a text or not. So if user not sending text, it's just returning error. As you can see in here, if the text doesn't available or the text.trim is empty, this basically will return next response.json success to false, and then the error is text is required. So let's try it here. I'm not gonna send the text, maybe just empty an object. So let's try to send. As you can see, text is required and we have this 400 beta requests. So now we need to store that to-do into the database. So here I'm going to say const to-do set equals to await for the Prisma, and I'm going to access the to-do table, and then I'm going to use create function, and then in here I'm going to add new data, right? So the data that I'm going to adding in here is the text. So let's put text set equals to text, and then I just want to remove space in here, so that will be remove that double space. And then for completed, by default I'm going to send that false, right? This is basically will adding new to do into database. Cool. So next what we have to do is let's send the to do into next response, right? So I'm going to send the data set equals to do like this. If something error happen, let's try to handle that. First, I'm going to console error, this one right here, right? And then finally just return next response.json. The success is false, the error is this one right here, and then the status is 500. Okay, I think it's fine right now. So let's try. Let's go back to the Thunder client. And basically we are going to first get all data, right? I'm going to get all data. And then as you can see, we have 500 internal server error. The reason is because I'm not start my PostgreSQL. Here we go. So let's try to send that again. Here we go. As you can see, we have empty array, right? So let's try to adding new to do here on this URL. I'm going to add text. I'm going to setting equals to learn Next.js maybe. Here we go. We have this error. So let's click this format and this will be fixed that format for us. So let's try adding learn Next.js to do. Here we go. It's successful. Now let's try make a get request. Here, as you can see, we have one to do on the get request, right? So we can also add another text in here like learn JavaScript, and then let's try to send. Here we go. As you can see, it's successful. Let's try to make a get request. Now we should see two to-dos, right? This one right here and this one right here. Super cool. The adding new to-do is working perfectly fine. So now let's try to working with the delete. So let's go back to the API/to-dos right here. We need to basically create another route to basically get the individual ID of the to-do, right? So inside the to-dos folder, I'm going to create another folder called ID like this inside an array. And inside that, I'm going to create the road.ts file like this. So let's first create the delete, right? Export async function. This one is going to be called a delete because we are going to make a delete request like this. And of course, we need to use try and catch. So on the delete function, what we have to grab in here is basically the request, right? The request, it should be have type next request, and also we need to grab the props basically. So let's grab the props, and then this props is have the params. Let's grab the params because as you can see in here, we're putting ID folder. That's why we can grab the params ID in here. So let's do params, and then we can grab the ID right here, right? The ID should be in string, just like this. So now let's try to, I think just console log or something like that. Console log the props, right? Let's try that. Here, I'm gonna go back to my local host. Let's try to make a delete request on the, for example, this ID right here, right? So we have to send ID basically. So to do slash ID, great. So now let's send that. And of course, it doesn't show anything, but as you can see on the terminal, I believe that we have these console log, right? So we have this promise with ID that's sending right here. It means this is successfully grabbed the props ID, right? So we can access the ID from the props. So of course we can grab the ID in here. So we can say cons and params that equals to, we can do props.params, right? And then in here, inside a try, what we are gonna do, let's try to destructuring the ID. We grab the ID from the params like that. And then what we have to do now is we need to await for the Prisma dot to do, right? And we're going to use delete because we are going to make a delete request in here. I'm going to delete the post where the ID is equal to ID that we send from the parameters, right? Just like this, it will basically delete that to do. Super simple. And then finally, we are going to make a return next response, right? .json. And then what we need to send in here is first success. It should always be true. And then I'm going to send the message. Let's just send to do deleted successfully. Just that's it. And for the catch, I just want to copy and paste. Just same catch like another road, as you can see right here. So now let's try to delete some to do. Let's go back right here on the Thunder client, and basically first I'm gonna go back to get, so you can see right here. I'm gonna get, as you can see, we have to do, right? I'm gonna delete, for example, the learn Next.js to do. I'm gonna copy the ID and then just paste that on the top right here. Change that into delete request like this. So let's try to send. And as you can see, to do deleted successfully. Let's try to go back right here. I'm going to make a get request and send that. As you can see now, we just have one learn JavaScript. Learn Next.js is deleted successfully. So now we need to create another road for basically update the toggle for complete and incomplete to do. So I think we can just copy and paste this delete, right? I'm gonna copy that and then just paste that on the top, I think. Paste that right here. This is for the put, right? And then I'm going to copy that and paste that right here. This is the export async function put, and then we can grab the request and then the props right here as well. So what we can update is basically the completed and also the text. That's why in here, I'm going to grab the text from the body. So let's do cons. We grab the body, right? So equals to wait for the request.json. This basically will grab the body when we make a, let me go back in here. Well, when we make a put request. So I'm going to duplicate this one and then change this to put request. And as you can see on the body, we can send text right here. So we can grabbing that on this request.json.body. On this body, we can grab the text and the completed value like this. And then finally down here, I'm going to create a variable called update data. This is the new data that I'm going to basically update the to-do. So first I'm going to make that empty object. And then finally in here, I'm going to check first if the text is have value or if the text is doesn't undefined. What I'm going to do in here is I'm going to update the data. So let's do update data dot text set equals to text dot trim. Here we go. And then in here, again, I'm going to check if the completed like this, not undefined, I'm going to update the data.completed into the completed value from the body. But as you can see, we have this error because it's not recognize this type of this update data basically. So that's why I'm going to use type in here. I'm going to call that partial. Partial is like not require field. And then I'm going to use pick in here. I'm going to pick from, let's do from the to-do basically right here. And then in this to-do, what I'm going to pick is basically the text. Text is string. And then I'm going to grab the completed. Completed is basically boolean, right? So now as you can see, the error is not show, and as you can see, if I hover this one, completed is optional and boolean, right? Partial is basically optional type. Great, so we're done. And then finally we need to update data right here. So let's remove this one. I'm gonna say const to do set equals to await for the Prisma dot to do, right? And then I'm gonna use update. What we need to update is where the ID is equal to ID, right? The ID should become from these params. And then what we have to update is data into the update data right here. Great. So now after that, we need to send the new to do as a response. So I'm going to paste that right here. And instead of message, I'm going to use data. I think just like that is fine. And if something wrong happened, I think I just want to, again, copy and paste the catch right here, right? Error updating to do, and then return next response.json, the success false, the error, and the status is 500. Okay, I think we're done with this update. So let's try to update with the Thunder client, this one right here. Just make sure you put requests. And I just want to like get all to do's. Where is that? Where's the get? This one right here. I'm gonna get all to do right here. Learn a JavaScript, the completed is false, right? And I'm gonna change the completed into true. So let's go to this one right here. I'm gonna change that to put request and go to slash that ID. And then what we need to update is the completed into true. Okay, so let's send that. And here we go. Now the completed is true. If I go back to get, as you can see, send, now the completed is true. I also try to change the text, for example. So let's do text into learn TypeScript. Okay, cool. So now let's send that. As you can see, learn TypeScript. If I go back to get, let me just send that. As you can see, learn TypeScript. So anyway, the CRUD functionality is done on the road, right? On the API stuff. So now let's try to integrate that API into the, let me go to this one right here, into the store. So first, I'm going to remove all this comment as a default value on the to-dos. And also I'm going to remove this persist, right? Persist is basically will store your to-do into the local storage. I'm not going to do that. So I just want to copy this arrow function, cut that out. And I'm going to remove this everything in here and then just paste the arrow function inside this create like this. Okay, I think it's cool. So let's just make it look better. The format, I think. Here we go. Nice. So now if I go back right here, as you can see, no to-dos, right? Because it's just get from here, not from my local storage. As you can see here, we just have one initial state called to-dos. But anyway, you can create like more than one initial state, like to-dos, is loading, and error, right? This is just for example. And then if you adding a new initial state on this use to-do store, of course, the type right here, it should be updated as well. So I'm going to just make a comment in here, call a state. First is the to-dos, and then the is loading, right? It's going to be in Boolean. And then we have also the error. The error is string, and it's also can be null, like that. Great. Now let's create a function to update the is loading value into like a true or false. In here, I'm going to make a comment called set loading state, like this, and let's just call that function set loading, or you can just naming that whatever you want. And then in here, just like we're doing on the bottom right here, we can just add a function. So let's do function. This function is like a parameters called I'm gonna call this loading. So user can basically send a parameter on the set loading function called loading, and the loading is Boolean. And then what we have to do in here is I'm gonna set is loading into new value from the state, which is loading. And also we can do the same thing on the error. So I'm gonna paste that right here, set error state. The name of the function is set error. It's like an error, right? Error parameters. It can be string or null. And it basically will set the error value from the state into the new error value from the parameters. Because we add new function in here, of course, we have to put type right here. So I'm going to call that helper action. So this helper action have set loading, stack a loading boolean, a return void, and set error function as well. Great, so we have that function, and then the next thing is we need to basically create a function to get all the to-dos. So in here, I'm going to create a fetch, right? This basically will get all to-dos from the database. And I'm going to create a function here. I'm going to call that fetch to-dos like this. And then this is basically a async function because we are going to get the data from the database, and that's need a time, right? So I'm going to say async function like this, and then just put the arrow function. And then in here, the first thing what we have to do is we need to basically make sure the loading it should be true, right? So that's why I'm going to say set the is loading. I'm going to setting the is loading to true, and then this error into null, right? And then after that, we need to say try and then catch. Okay, so inside the try, what we have to do first is we need to make a fetch request. So I'm going to do cons, and then let's say cons response equals to await, right? We need to say fetch into the /API/todos, right? We are going to make a get request in this row, and then we grab the result, right? So here I'm going to say cons result set equals to await for the response.json. So great, we have the result. And then finally, what we have to do is I'm going to check if the result dot success is true, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to set to do's on the top right here, right, into the new value from the result, like this. And then also I'm going to make sure the is loading, it should be false in this case, right? Before we make a fetch, it should be true. And then after we make a fetch and it's successful, the is loading, it should be false. But if we have the result is not success, so we can say else. Down here, what we have to do is we need to set the to-dos into result.error. And then the is loading, of course, it should be always back to false. And then finally, if something wrong happened, the catch right here. So let's just paste that right here. As you can see, the set, it should be set the error value into failed to fetch to do, and the is loading is false, and then just a console error, this one right here. Just that's it. So let's try to use the fetch to do's function on the page.tsx right here, right? So I'm gonna copy and paste this one, and then let's grab the function name fetch to do's, and then paste that right here. We're grabbing that from the state. As you can see, we have this error. The reason is we not yet update the type, I believe, on the top right here. So let's do actions, and then in here I'm gonna paste that fetch to-dos, and then this fetch to-dos, it should be a function that return promise, right? Promise like this, and this promise is just returning void, just like that. And let's take a look. Now on the page, there's no error. Super cool. So now we need to basically run this function to get new to-dos, right? I'm gonna run that function on the use effect on the first render. So let's do use effect, and then just run a arrow function inside that, and we are gonna put the fetch to-dos. The dependency of this use effect, it should be the fetch to-dos. So now we should see the to-dos value. So let's try to just console log that like this. Now we can just go back, and as you can see, we have this error. I'm not sure what happened, but let's take a look on the console. And as you can see, basically we have the array, but in here we have object. So I think the reason is because by default, the to-dos is array, and then something wrong happened on the fetch to-do that make it that array into object, as you can see. So we have to just use the data, not all object. So I think I'm doing wrong with the to-do right here. Set to-dos into result. So anyway, the to-dos, it should be have value result dot to-do like this, I believe. Yep, let's try to just refresh that one, and cannot read property of undefined reading length. So I think this length right here is not undefined. So let's try to just grab the another value like is loading and also the error. Let's grabbing that from here. I'm gonna copy that like that, and then we can grab the is loading, and also we can grab the error like this. And then let's try to add the condition down here. So the first thing is I'm going to just render the error like this, right? If we have the error value, just render the error like this. And also right here, so the first thing is I'm gonna check if the is loading is true and the to-dos.length is basically 0. What I'm gonna do is let's try to render a div in here, right? I'm gonna render this div that have the loading to-dos, and else basically I'm gonna render all this div. So I'm gonna cut that out and then just paste that inside this condition, just like this. So now let's take a look on the browser, and then I'm gonna refresh that. As you can see, we still have the error. I'm not sure what happened. Cannot read property of undefined reading length. To-do.length 0 right here is now undefined. So let's try to just console log the to-do so we can see what happened. As you can see, the to-dos is by default this empty array and it's becoming undefined. I'm not sure what happened, so let's try to go back to to-do store, and basically this one right here on the API/to-dos, what we doing is basically, let's take a look on the API/to-do is basically return the data, right? Success and data. So in here we get the to-do, so there's no reason, so we have to grab the data, not the to-do. So now as you can see, we have the value, right? If I refresh that, we have this empty array, and then we have the array, and cool, everything should be works. Let's try to go back to page and just remove the console log, and as you can see, anyway, we get the data. And if I go back to Thunder client and add new data right here on the body, I'm gonna add learn CSS, for example. Let's try to send, and if I go back in here, try to refresh, as you can see, we have learn CSS, right? It works basically. Great. So now let's try to working with the add to do function on the to-do store.ts file, right? So we're going to just basically change this function. So anyway, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all this set right here. We don't need this like this. And then anyway, I just want to copy and paste everything come from the top right here, right? Come from the fetch to do function. I'm going to copy that and just paste that like this, right? And as you can see on this await, we get an error because this function, it should be async function, because we are going to make a post request on this API/to-dos, right? And then we are gonna specify this should be have method post basically. So I'm gonna make sure that the method that we need to send is basically post request. And then we have also sending headers, right? Content type application JSON. And also we need to send the body basically. So the body should be wrapped inside the JSON.stringify, and we need to send text in here, right? Text set equals to text from the parameters, just like that. And finally down here we have the result, right? The result come from the response.json, and then in here we basically check, right? If the result.success is true, it's basically will set the to-dos state into the result.data. But remember, result.data in this case is just one data or one to do. So we need to also grab all the previous to do value and then adding this new data in here. So the way we do that is, I think first I'm going to just remove this object, right? And then in here, I'm going to run a arrow function. So now in this arrow function, we're just returning object, right? And then this parameter, we can grab the state. And then what we have to do in here is for the to-dos, I'm going to put the new to-do in here. So the new to-do, I'm going to create a new to-do set equals to, the new to-do, it should become from the result.data like that. And then we're going to grab the new to-do right here on the front. And then don't forget to also put the previous to-dos from the state. So I'm going to use 3 dot and then state dot I believe to-dos, right? This is basically will access these to-dos on the state right here, right? Cool. So, and then next thing is we need to also update the is loading, right? Because the is loading the first time is true, we need to change that. Now it should be a false, just like that. And if something wrong happen, I like to also put the error set equals to result.error. I think this is fine. And then the is loading back to false. Great. And then when something wrong happen, when we make a post request, I'm going to say failed to fetch to add, right? To add to do's. This is basically just single to do. And then this should be add to do error. So now let's try to use this function on the, let me go back to the add to do form. This is basically, we are going to use the add to do function. So the first thing is I'm going to grab also the is loading value from the state, right? Like this. And now we can just put the is loading into the, for example, this button. When the is loading happen, I like to the button, it should be disabled, right? Just like this. I also want to the button is disabled when the input is empty. So I'm gonna say if the input doesn't have any value, I'm going to make sure that the button it should be also disabled. So let's take a look. Let's refresh that. As you can see, this button is just disabled. Let me just try that. I'm gonna say if the button disable, I'm gonna say background to maybe like I don't know, I'm gonna say gray maybe, right? Gray like 200 or something like that. And as you can see now the button is disabled, right? Pretty cool. So anyway, I also want to change this function in here. So I'm gonna create another function on the top. I'm gonna call that handle key press set equals to an arrow function. I grab the event. So the event it should be keyboard event. So let's grab that keyboard event come from the React. And then let's just try to returning object like this. And in here, basically what I'm gonna do is this one right here. I'm gonna check if the event.key is enter. And then I'm gonna add this if the is loading is false. So user can basically handle submit, copy the name, and then just paste that on the key down right here. Here we go. Cool. So I think it's done. So now let's try to add a new to do, right? I'm going to refresh just to make sure everything clean. Now let's go with learn, maybe React. Let's hit enter. And here we go, guys, that we have this value. If I refresh, of course, it's still there. That's pretty cool. So let's try to working with the delete functionality. If I click this trash icon, it should be delete that to do, right? So let's go back to the to-do store.ts file, and basically this is the delete, right? The delete function. So anyway, I'm going to just copy everything in here from the create, and then I'm going to paste that down here, right? And of course, I'm gonna change the name of the function into delete to do. And then I'm going to make a comment in here. Let's say delete to do from database, right? Great. So in this delete to do is basically take ID, not text. So that's why I'm going to change this to ID. And then the first thing what happened is it set the loading to true and error to null. I think we're going to use this one, right? Cool. So the next thing is on the try, instead of using post method, we're going to use delete method. So I'm going to paste that delete and then just remove the headers and the body because we don't need that on the delete request. Great. And so now we also need to send ID, right? So I'm going to use template literals and I'm going to paste the ID right here. The ID is basically come from the parameters. So let's grab the ID and paste that right here. ID like this. Right, cool. So now we get the result, this one right here, cool. And then we check if the result is success, which is this one right here, what we have to do, right? For now, we need to just basically change the loading to false, right? So I'm gonna say set loading. I think we have to use set, and then inside that we need to say is loading into false, like this. And I just want to remove the else, we don't need that, and also this one right here. So I think like this is fine. So let's try, right? I'm gonna go back in here, try to refresh. So everything should be clean, and I'm gonna remove the learn React on the top right here. So let's click delete and nothing happened. So let's try to go back to the page, right? On the to-do item, I believe this is basically the way we run the delete to do, right? So let's take a look. The delete to do right here. So I think this should be work. So let's try to go back, and as you can see, that is gone. So let's try to just delete it again. As you can see, nothing happened on the screen, but I believe this is working on the network. That means our database is already deleted that data, I believe, as you can see in here. Let me try to refresh that, and as you can see, we should see this one to do. If I click delete, as you can see, this is basically working to do delete successfully, right? If I refresh, it's gone. So anyway, what happened is the UI is not updated. So that's why let's try to add new to do, and we're going to work with that first. Let's go back to do store. And in here, basically, we need to also update the to-dos state, right? So first, I think we are going to get the original to-dos on the top right here. So let's grab that. This is the original to-dos. We can grab that from the get function and then get the to-dos state, right? And then in here, I'm going to set, right? So let's run arrow function. Because we're using set, of course, we can access the state inside the parameters in here. So we can grab the state, and then what we need to change in here is basically the to-dos like this. So I'm going to filter that to do if the ID is not matched. So as you can see, I just running to-dos.filter if the to-do.id is not matched with the ID from the top, right? And just like this. And then finally, we are going to, if something wrong happened, right? I want to say in here, if something wrong happened, that means if the result is not success, what I'm going to do is I want to set the to-do back to the original to-do, this one right here. So I'm going to paste this set, right? The to-do should be original to-do, the error is result.error, and that is loading always back to false. And then in here, if something wrong happened when I delete that to-do, it should be always go back to the original to-dos, right? So that's why I also want to paste that right here. The set to-dos, it should be original to-dos, and the error, I just want to paste just string like this, failed to delete to-do, and it's loading back to false, right? So let's try here. I'm going to refresh, and then let's do 1 2 3 enter. Just random things. So I just want to see what happened if I click delete. So let's delete the 1 2 3. As you can see, it's just gone. gone, and that's super cool, right? It just works basically. Super nice. So next, let's try to working with the update tags. As you can see in here, basically we can update the to-do, right? So let's try to update that. Here, this is the function, I believe, right? Update right here. So I'm gonna change this one to like update to do in database. Great. So let's try to just copy and paste like we're doing on the top right here, right? I just wanna copy everything in here, the function, and then just paste that on the update right here, right? Just paste that like this. And of course the function, it should be update to do. Here we go. Where is that? Update to do like this. Cool. So this update to do function, it should be grab parameters, ID, and also the tags, right? So I'm going to use data in here. So data is basically an object, and inside data, it should be sending this text. Text is basically an optional. User can send or not the text. So it should be a string, and also I'm gonna send the completed as well. Completed. It also optional, and then this is going to be a boolean, right? So let's take a look. The first is it's basically we'll set the loading to true. Yep, this is what we want. And then the original to-dos, yep, we grab the original to-dos. And then basically what we have to do is not remove, but we are going to update, right? So I just want to remove this filter. What we have to do is say dot map. Okay, we just map all the to do and select where the ID is matched, right? So here I grab the individual to do, and then finally just running this one right here, to do dot ID. If this is equal to ID that I send into the parameters right here, what I'm going to do is let's try to return a new object, right? And I'm going to grab all the to do from here, right? From the default value. And then I'm going to put the new data. So let's grab the new data in here, right? This one right here. And then else just render the to do from the original to dos, right? I hope this is makes sense. Now, what we have to do after we set the to-dos, right? Next thing is, of course, we have to update the to-do using the fetch, right? So in here, what we have to do is we need to await fetch API to-dos ID, and we are going to make sure the method that we need to use is basically put, and then we need to send also the headers and etc. So let's try to just copy from the top in here. This one, I'm going to copy that. And then let's scroll down into the update right here, and then just paste that. Great. So now we have the headers. The headers is content type application JSON, and also we need to send the body. In this case, I'm going to send the data. Remember, the data is basically parameters that have text and completed. Great. So finally, when the result success is true, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called update to do set equals to it should be result dot data, right? Cool. We have the updated to do right here. So now we need to update the to dos based on the server value. So I'm gonna paste that right here. As you can see, it is basically will running the set, and then it's basically change the to dos into the new updated to do right here. Right, basically we're doing 2 times. The first is before we make a fetch on the top right here, and the second is after we make a fetch, right? After this is successful, after the result is success, we also set that UI into the update to do. And then here, if something wrong happen, I like to the to do should be back to the original to do. Okay, great. This is what we want. And then the catch right here, I think is fine. And I'm gonna change the text in here to failed to update to do. And then this one right here, it should be update to do error. Right, I think that's what we want. So let's take a look where this update to do running. I'm going to go back to the let me see, to do item, I believe, and search that this one right here. But remember, on the second parameter on the update to do is basically object. So we cannot send the edit text like this. So we need to send object in here. So what I should send in here is text, right? And the text, it should become from the edit text like this. And I'm going to remove the double space like this. Great. So now let's take a look. I hope this works. If I hover, why this is a show error? Argument of type text is not assignable. Oh yeah, I think this is because on the to-do store, we not yet update the type right here on the top, right? So anyway, I'm going to update all these function in here. As you can see, for the update to do, this tag ID, data, text, or completed, and return promise. So everything is just return promise, right? Cool. So let's try to go back to the to-do item. And now as you can see, the error, it should be gone. Great. So now let's try to see when we update something. Here, I'm going to update learn React, hit enter. As you can see, it's just immediately apply because we're doing 2 times set on the store, right? Let me just go back in here to just show you what happened. This one right here, right? The first thing is this one. This just immediately apply on the screen when I update the text. And then after I fetch, this is basically the real data, right? That happened. If something wrong happened, it should be make the to do to the original to do, right? So anyway, there is one function that we miss, right? Which is the toggle completed right here, right? If I click it completed, but this is just happen on the state, not on the database. If I refresh, it's still, as you can see, not completed. So let's try to update the function on the to-do store. This one right here, right? Toggle to do. So toggle to do is basically function that take ID. And then for now, I'm going to remove the set, everything in here. And then what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create variable called todos, right? Set equals to, I'm going to grab the to-do value. So I'm going to say get function. I'm going to grab all the to-dos, and then I'm going to filter that. And here I'm going to say this is basically the individual to do. I'm going to use t, right? And then if t.id is equal to id, like this, right? And then in here, if the to do is available, that means if user click the id that available, this is going to be running this one right here. Oh wait, I'm going to say get. I'm going to run the update to do. So anyway, what I'm doing in here is basically I'm running function update to do on another function, right? We can do that basically. So here we need to send the ID, right? Because this function is take ID and data, right? So I'm going to send ID and then object, which is data in this case, that have completed, right? And I'm going to send this to do dot completed. I think we get this error here. The reason is I'm not sure. All right, this is because this is using await, but the function is not using async. So we can fix that by put async like this. And then this one right here, property completed does not exist on type to do. So anyway, this is because we're using filter in here. So let's try to using find. So this basically will find any to do that have same ID. And then on that to do, if that to do available, it's basically will change the completed value into the opposite of the to do completed value. That's it. So let's try. Here, I'm going to click this as a completed to do. As you can see, it's make a request basically, right? And now let's try to refresh. This is basically still completed because this is come from the database, right? If I do learn Zustand state management, if I hit enter, as you can see, it's right here. If I click that, it also make a request. Okay, it's pretty nice. I can update that right here with Chan dev. As you can see, it just works, right? Everything, it just works. If I click delete, it also working. If I refresh, as you can see, that's what we want. So anyway, the things that I'm going to update is basically the loading. I don't like that loading show like that. So let's go to do stats. And then I think I'm going to remove this one right here. like that, and then just remove the use effect and use state. We don't need that. Let's try to refresh. As you can see, we don't have the loading right here, right? Let's do learn new things, hit enter, and then, or I can update things right here, delete, delete. Okay, so I think that's it guys for this video. I hope you can implement the Zustand state management on your full stack application. In this case, you can use Prisma and any database you want, right? So hope this video is helpful. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one.